Hi, my name is Steve Rahi. I am a Premier Field Engineer specializing in management technologies. Today's discussion will be a look at current branch for Configuration Manager, specifically around the idea of using it for Windows 10 servicing, exploring the Windows 10 servicing options, which are OSD and using software updates. And we want to see those actually in action. So we'll work through this discussion in a bit more detail than whenever we did the overview session. So three real sections that we want to talk about. First, we will focus on OSD, a few things I want to show there. We will then look at the Windows 10 servicing node, the options there, kind of walk through and then watch it work, right? Or kind of, little asterisks there. You'll understand that in a little bit. Talk about some potential issues, some uh, known, now that I've dealt with, and certainly not an exhaustive list, but we'll talk about those. So in terms of OSD specifically, right? So OSD is the mechanism by which we can upgrade Windows 10 in both Configuration Manager 2012 and Configuration Manager Current Branch. Now the goal with Windows 10 is largely to not have to uh, really do a full traditional OSD experience, which will be, regardless of whether it looks like a full wipe or not, it will be a wipe and load. People have gotten really good about engineering when OSD experiences to where they can look very much like an upgrade, but under the covers they are always a wipe and load. The traditional experience uses a WEM file, right? Contrast that, and that's perfectly viable today. There are places in which using the traditional approach is still necessary. As an example, if you're wanting to move or upgrade a system and move it to a new architecture as far as processing architecture at the same time, x86, x64, that is truly a wipe and load, right? But for the vast majority of cases, an upgrade scenario is fine. And here are there are three things that I'll just mention here and show you. So the upgrade makes use of the operating system upgrade package. That's not the typical thing that people use historically. Historically, it would just be an operating system image. Here we have to use the upgrade package. I'll show that to you. In the task sequence wizard, there's an option, upgrade an operating system from upgrade package. That is the choice to make, and it will build a task sequence that will accommodate. And the other point here is there, if you look at the properties of that task sequence that's created, I'll show it to you, there is no boot WEM associated with it, right? It, in the truest sense of the word, it's it's very similar to task sequences that have been used outside of OSD. There is no that the hallmark of those is there is no boot image, right? Typically. So here, that's certainly the case. So let's go look at these. Let me pull in my lab to kind of take a peek. Specifically, we're going to start with OSD as we're talking about it in the software updates node. So first place to start, we have the operating system images package, which is the WEM file. This is where we think of, for most cases, having our content staged for the OS. But this is not the section that we would use in an upgrade scenario. For traditional OSD, absolutely, right? This is the same process as we've always done. For the specific upgrade scenario, though, it's not, right? So if I look under the upgrade packages, you see I have another version here. What's the difference? So this one, I mean, if you go up to the top and you add an operating system, it asks for a source directory and so on. If you go to the upgrade packages and right click and add operating system, it looks for a source directory. It's not really different, right? So it does say I need to specify a valid UNC path, but I could just as easily, this is my server, specify a WEM file, and it would absolutely bring that WEM file in, not a problem, and fail when we try to use it, right? It doesn't want a WEM file. If we look specifically at the package that's here and go to properties, you'll see the data source path here is just simply a folder, right? In this case, it was the CD-ROM. So I should have the CD-ROM still mounted, the ISO, I believe. Let's go see. So if I map to that, and look, all this is the source directory. I'm sorry, this is the CD source material, just like I was going to put a CD in the drive and install that way. It's exactly the same. We know that because this has been deployed to a distribution point. It is package ID 70. So if I go look in my content library right here and go into datalib where I can see the kind of the rough folder structure, go down to 70. In fact, it is the same. Now, these aren't the real files. These are just INI files pointing to other places, but still, it's the same structure that you just saw on the DVD, right? So very different than the WIM, and such. Just be careful you don't make a mistake there whenever importing into the upgrade packages. I've made that mistake, so learn from experience. The Windows 10 upgrade task sequence. So if I go down to task sequences, here is my Windows 10 task sequence for demo. So what I can do to create this is simply go to the Create Task Sequence wizard. It will ask me to upgrade an operating system, or I will tell it to upgrade an operating system. It'll ask me the name. Then I have to specify the upgrade package. So there is no other choice. You have to use an upgrade package. And then product key if I want, next, updates, applications, whatever. And I finish the task sequence. Go look at the task sequence. It's very basic, right? So checks prerequisites. This is something to be very aware of, especially if you're working in a VM environment for testing and such. You do need to meet these minimum requirements. 2 gig of RAM for the OS. Doesn't have to all of that be available, but we want to have that 2 gigs. And the minimum processor speed shouldn't be a problem. And that we have the current OS to be refreshed as the client, right? All right, so beyond that, we have the new upgrade operating system step. So we don't have these this nice clean look if we're trying to do this same experience in 2012. It is fully supported in 2012, but there's a series of run command line steps and other things that we need to do to get to the same place. Here, it's baked into the engine, right? So here's our upgrade package. I could choose a different source path if I wanted to and just hard code it here, other details and so on. And that's really it, right? Post-processing that I might want to do, add in whatever applications or whatever that we need. There's really no driver need here because all we're doing is upgrading the OS on the existing hardware. There's no partitioning, there's no Windows PE phase, nothing, right? Really clean experience driven through OSD. So if I look at properties of this task sequence, we can tell that there is no boot image, right? No need for it. We're not needing to do anything to prepare the system and so on. We're just upgrading right on top of it. All right, so I do have the upgrade deployment right here of the task sequence to my system. I've actually got 2 whenever I was testing. So let me pull in my test system that should have all this there. If it will move, there we go. All right, and launch Software Center. Right here, Software Center. And we should have the OSD deployment. Here it is. So I can kick this off. Now, so I mentioned that I did mention that there's no boot WIM. That's true, but it's also not true, right? We'll progress hopefully far enough in here so that I can show you. There's no boot image that is needed by the task sequence. But as setup.exe runs on this, doing the upgrade, you will see in just a minute that we're going to go download some files. One of them is going to be the boot WIM, right? Another will be the install WIM, and all those files that are on our source directory. But so it is true to say that we don't really need a boot WIM on the task sequence, but we do need a boot WIM, and it's going to be in the source media. We're going to download it and work with it accordingly, because at some point we will reboot. We will start into the experience looking like a clock, showing the progress of the update and so on. Here, you see that we're downloading the boot WIM and so on, right? So I'll just let this run for a bit. No problem. Maybe check back in on it if I remember to as we go along, right? So that's the Windows 10 traditional OSD experience plus the upgrade experience and so on, right? But there's another way in Configuration Manager current branch, and that's to use the Windows 10 servicing node. The Windows 10 servicing node is actually a really cool place in the console to keep track of all of your Windows 10 deployment activities. So I'll show you all of these. There's the Windows 10 status dashboard, which you can use regardless of whether you actually do the upgrade with upgrade management with OSD or whatever mechanism. There's the Windows 10 updates section, which in parentheses is upgrades, because really all that section does is filter the list of software updates to those that are in the upgrade category. So wish it was actually named Windows 10 upgrades. It's not, it's Windows 10 updates, right? I can understand why that was the case, but either way, that's my thing that I kind of get hung up on. Servicing plans, that's where we actually will go create the equivalent of the automatic deployment rules, but this time focused on deploying Windows 10. Right now, I call out 15.11 version of ConfigMgr here, not Windows, and 16.02. Right? There is a difference between the two OSs in terms of the servicing plans. So you will see in my environment, which is on 16.02, how that works. Right? But suffice it to say that in 15.11, one of the options that we have for filtering was not present there. And it really caused some large downloads to take place. I'll explain that more as we get into it. So let's get into it here. Come into my lab again. We'll focus this time on the Windows 10 servicing nodes. Let's close this back up. All right. And in the Windows 10 servicing node, just click at the top to begin. Really some good visuals here to help understand what your Windows 10 deployment status is across your environment. So the Windows 10 usage first is color coded to define, the lighter blue here is version 15.07. I have two of my systems in my lab. I have 4 total Windows 10 test systems. So 2 of them are running Windows 10 15.07. 2 of them are now running Windows 10 15.11, so they're a different color of blue, right? So I can visually tell what the status of my environment is, and whether I'm up to date, whether I have some work to do, and so on, right? Under the Windows 10 rings, so this is not your deployment rings. These are the deployment rings that kind of describe where the OSs live, right? So another way to say that is in every Windows 10 system, you have the opportunity to configure what's called deferral of updating, right? So this one's running my image. Hopefully I can get this done. I'm sure I can in time. But if we go into settings, if it's going to cooperate with me, because probably it's busy doing that, let me pull in another one that we'll get to in a second. Here, there we go. So if you go into settings, and then you go into updates and security, and then here we go into advanced options, you have the ability to defer updates on certain OS versions. Right? That's what I'm referring to. So if you have deferred updates turned on, then that's going to mean that you are in the current branch, business ready branch of Windows 10. Right? If you don't have deferral turned on, then you are in the release ready branch of Windows 10. Right? And then if you have long-term servicing branch, it will be displayed in an altogether different color. Right? Here you can see that I have all 4 of these systems, regardless of version, are configured as release ready. No alerts, so a little square here tile that will tell you whether you have alerts or not. I can see that 50% of my systems are going to expire soon. How do I know that? Well, this will tell me, first of all, and it's good. None are expired, right? I can go create a servicing plan if I want to. But the beyond just a numerical representation of how many are expiring, you can look in the scroll down and look at the graphic further. So how many, first of all, servicing plans you have. You can monitor your service plans. I just have one. It's not an exciting graph for me with just one. But if you have multiple, it could be very interesting for you. Further, so to scroll down a little bit more, this one is really, really interesting, because here's where we try to help you track the various versions of Windows 10 that are out there. and let you know when they're going to expire, what the most current is, and so on. So version 1511, or 1507, which I have two of, has been tracking along here since the 7th of, since July of 2015, have been tracking along. And now that we are in March, or when we hit March, it started to become in a red status. Why? Because it's soon going to expire, right? As we roll forward, 1511 was launched on November of 2015, and it's green and green we go, right? Still in an okay state, hasn't hit the red mark yet, right? Which is why only 50% are reflected up above as being in that place, right? So very, very useful graphs that will help you keep track of your environment, right? Okay, so if we expand the Windows 10 servicing node and look at all Windows 10 updates, which really should be upgrades, I think, but nonetheless, we can go in. We'll see that this is very much a software updates like view. It's just here we're focusing in on the upgrade. So I have two upgrades that are actionable, one here and two here, right? Or on one system and on two systems, respectively. I can scroll on down. I can see there's 768 items in just this view. There's a lot, right? So in my lab, I just have those four systems, two of which are at 1507, and that's why two of them are reporting that we need this, right? Okay. So I could choose if I wanted to just to deploy the update from here. That's certainly possible, right? I could track my deployment. Wouldn't tend to recommend it, right? And you see that I've done several tests in here. Wouldn't tend to recommend it, right? But you could, right? Ultimately, a deployment of software of a update, an upgrade, I keep doing that too, an upgrade deployment will create the deployment. It just won't be on the servicing plan, right? If you use the servicing plan, it will create a deployment, but it's going to create it here. As you can see, here are the deployments that have been created, right? Those deployments actually are created against software update groups of the name associated with the servicing servicing plan, right? So you see several of them here. You see the deployments of them and so on as I've gone along, right? So know that, right? If you do create a servicing plan and you run that servicing plan and you allow it to do its thing, right? It will create a software update group and deploy that software update group with the pieces that we find through the wizard. So let's go through that wizard. I'll just go to properties on the one that I have here. I'm calling this immediate just so I can go ahead and get things to roll out, right? So here's my deployment settings, and by default, it's only error messages. I like to see everything and be able to track. Up to you which one you choose. Right? What I want to do with the updates once I find them, the servicing plan, here's the collection that I'm going against. The deployment ring, I've just said business ready and immediate, right? So here's where I choose my upgrades, okay? And notice here, so this is a window that is not in version 1511. Here we allow you to do filtering so that instead of absorbing that entire list of 768 upgrades and having to download it, you can filter, right? So let me show you the list without filtering, okay? So let's preview this, and it might take a second to load because there's so many. And through the magic of video editing, you don't have to wait for this to show up. It took about a minute and a half maybe for all these to show up, but you can tell the list of these updates is quite large. If you did not have the ability to filter, then you would have to take all 256 of these updates and they would be downloaded and put into the deployment package and so on, which is just an incredible waste of space, right? So the filtering is something we definitely want. Notice also, so let me turn the filter back on for a minute. Well, before I do, so notice the name, upgrade to Windows 10 Pro or Enterprise or whatever, right? Let me go back and make an adjustment. So if I go to the deployment ring and say release ready, and then go back to upgrades and hit preview, Now look at the names. Windows 7, Windows 8.1, a completely different set of updates or upgrades, right? Still 256 that are displayed here, okay? But differently focused. Okay, so be careful which you choose and such um, to make sure you're on the right branch of the deployment when you're configuring the servicing plan. All right, so let me go back to where I was. I'm not going to save this anyway, so it doesn't matter. But let me go back here, come back to upgrades. Now, if I simply change my language and focus my language to English, that's going to drop that list a tremendous amount. If I simply focus to the required, if there's more than one or at least one system that requires it, right? What I want to do. Make sure I don't know why it's grabbing at me here. Let me cancel this and go back into properties. That's probably the easiest way. Okay, and now if I do a preview here, same exact screen, not sure what it was griping at, I'm focused down to one upgrade, right? So significant ability to reduce extra work and extra space required on the server. Right, from here, we just go on through, tell it the evaluation schedule here. I'm just going to run the rule anytime there's been a software update sync. The schedule where I want to deploy it, I'm going to make it just at my own pace, not going to be required. The user experience, display in Software Center, only show notifications for restarts and so on. Download settings, how I want to handle that. The alerts, language settings, deployment package, ultimately, where I'm going to store this, right? So as I hit run here, it will actually kick off and start to run the rules that I have created in this servicing plan. So let me show you what that looks like. So if I go into the logs, there are two logs that I care about here. I'll only show you one of them, but I'll talk about the other. So if I go into the logs folder and then search for rules engine, this is where all the logging takes place for this component whenever it runs the servicing plan. No big surprise there. This is the log that handles the automatic deployment rules for software updates. This uses essentially the same engine, so no big surprise there. Not really any work to do. I've already got things downloaded, but this is work that was done previously, showing the downloading of the updates and so on. Download action completed and such. This shows you how many individual configuration items are in target for downloading. So I chose 2 whenever this actually went through and downloaded. But if you didn't have that filter, you would have a string of configuration items that runs off the right-hand side of the screen. And there would be a lot of work this had to do. You could run out of disk space because of maybe constraints in that way, right? So the filter is a fantastic option. The actual downloading, whenever we get to the downloading option, that is done by, or that is monitored, tracked by a log called patch downloader, right? So it's not in the logs folder. In fact, let me just go find it because I always forget where it is. So we'll find it there. There it is. Okay. So patch downloader DLL. Let me go find that log file there. So program files, config manager logs. Ah, interesting. So it might be in the same folder here. And there it is. Look at that. From in config manager 2012, it was not here. So I just assumed it wasn't here either in current branch, but I was wrong. It is in the same logs location, and you can track all the downloads and so on. Right? Okay. So get those out of the way. And talk now about, so we talked about servicing plans. I have, you'll notice there is no deployment tab here, right? This isn't a deployment plan, it's a servicing plan. And so you wouldn't expect there to be a deployment tab there. But you do expect that when this runs, there will be a deployment created, right? And so that deployment is in fact there, as I mentioned, for software update groups. I probably just created another one by running the rule wizard, or I will soon. But you can see here's the deployment. and such. So it's ready to go, right? In terms of monitoring how this deployment's going and the success rate, it's just like doing a software update. Just go to the deployments node and then go find your software updates, and that's in that category, and you can track the success rate and so on of the update, right? Okay, so I've deployed this. Now let me go to my test client and actually see this run. And this is where I mentioned at the beginning of this discussion a great big old asterisk, right? Because it is here. You can tell that it's here. It shows failed, right? And as the stars aligned as I put this together, I think honestly at the end of the day, what's wrong, I could be wrong, still checking, right? But uh, what's happened here is that the file itself that is trying to be deployed is somehow not not completely solid, right? So let me. Well, that reminds me. While I'm doing that, so I mentioned that the deployment or the upgrade package for OSD would be the source directory, essentially, from the DVD media, the ISO file, whatever, right? It's a very different set of source, at least in appearance, here. So this is my source directory for the software update I downloaded, and there's only two entities in here, and notice what they are. There's an ESD file, and then there's the exe to drive the installation, right? So the ESD file, kind of think of it as a WIM file, just a different kind of WIM file, if you will. It's probably not the way that it's best to describe it, but essentially the same. It's a file that contains the OS that we're trying to deploy, right? So you can see it's 3 gig in this case, so having to download multiples of those not good. But here we just have the two that we needed, and we'll expand this on the client. We'll run the install and setup and so on, right? So different source structure for sure. So the challenge I think I ran into, and I'll show you why I think, is whenever I run this, it does do what it's supposed to do. I'll retry it here just to show, but it has the source directory local, just like I would expect it to. So it downloads that, no problem. Okay, and have the ESD files, no problem, right? Tries to execute them, and it says right now installing, it'll go to failed in just a minute. In order to track the install, you can look at WUA handler, right? And this is the error that is coming up. So we do the scan, we see it's needed, we start the install, and we get this really weird error about upgrade installation result indicates the commit cannot be done. Well, I didn't know what that was, poked around with it for a while, finally get this error too, which doesn't help me a ton, right? Says it completed, but we really didn't do anything. And so knowing how Windows setup works, just kind of started digging around in those directories and such. We could go to updates handler, updates deployment, all those logs that are for software updates apply here as well. But now with this error and having to dig further, there's a couple of places to go. First place I would look is the Windows Update log, but there is no Windows Update log on Windows 10. It's gone. In fact, if I try to go find the Windows Update log, you'll see that it's there, but then when I try to open it, it will tell me that it's not there, right? So essentially, here's what I get. Update logs now are in ETW, and you can convert them and so on, which uh, we can do. But instead of doing that and going further there, what I decided to do is, with some help, remember that the setup folder, there's actually a hidden folder for Windows setup that is created during setup, and when setup is finished, it gets cleaned up. But there's the structure here, right? And I probably have missed out on it. It's already been cleaned up. Let me go get it again. Okay, so it's here, right? And in the Panther folder, this is a hidden folder, but in the Panther folder, there's this setup ACT, and if I click on it, I see that it was created just now whenever I did the install, and in fact, an error message right here talking about not being able to find a module. If I translate this in CMTrace error translation or error lookup, look it up, then the module cannot be found. Well, what module is that? Well, look right before, and it's trying to load from this path, sources directory, setup UI manager. And so this is something, this entire path is something that is expanded when the install starts, right? It's almost like a cab being extracted is what I think about it. And so this comes directly from that ESD, I believe. I could be wrong in that, but it seems to hold. And if I go to that path, here, sources, and look for setup, uh, what is it, setup UIMGR, there is no such thing here, right? So of course it's not going to be able to complete. There's a setup MGR. Again, I don't know any of the details around this yet. I just am starting to try to understand it and such. Submitted a bug on it. Probably it's just my luck of the draw that this is the update or upgrade uh, piece, file, or component, whatever. The choice that I made here in the UI, because that's what was needed by my systems. It probably, if I chose something else, it wouldn't fail. Maybe I just luck of the draw had the wrong one that I picked or whatever. But either way, it's here. You can see that it got to the Windows 10 machine, and it's just not executing because of the fact that file's not there. At least that's what I think it is, right? So may or may not be, but that's what it looks like right now. Okay. And just to pull in, my OSD imaged machine has continued along, and it's doing the Windows 10 upgrade thing, right? So it looks totally normal. Now, in terms of potential issues, right? So as you go through this, it's a good thing. Make sure that the latest WSUS and Windows Update Agent patches are present. So specifically, for anything past build 1602 of ConfigMgr and Windows Update and so on, there is a hotfix out there that you need to apply. Probably a good idea to apply it even before that, but it is, let me find it here because I have it in my lab here. So it is, I deployed it myself, 3159706 is the KB number, and need to have that there. If you don't, very quickly now, the WSUS server is not going to be able to work effectively with Windows 10 upgrades, right? Suffice it to say, well, without belaboring the point, there was some magic that was happening there that is no longer going to happen without this patch being present to understand these ESD files and decoding them and different things. It's going to not work any further. So make sure you get that patch on there pretty quickly. Then, as always, third-party disk encryption is an issue, right? So for those that are using third-party disk encryption, probably your most simple path forward, and even this might not be simple, is to use OSD for your Windows 10 deployments. But even there, there's a process that needs to happen. It's different, I guess, with different vendors perhaps. Checkpoint is the one I'm most familiar with, where filter drivers have to be inserted into various locations in the source directories. Okay, so with those third-party utilities, a little bit more work or work to get it done, but it can be made to work, right? So that's really it. As we tour around how Current Branch actually works to help with Windows 10 servicing. So we will wrap the session from here, and I will see you